Are we good? Okay. Thank you everyone for your patience. Sorry, we're starting late. Welcome to the Governance Committee. After our initial procedures, we will have a chance for public comment. We will start with our roll call. Dr. Hurst, could you please take roll call?
Absolutely. President Smith Folds.
Good afternoon, everyone. Present.
Trustee Clerk Gonzalez Hoy.
Present.
And then we have some guests here as well. We have interim Associate Superintendent as of July the 1st, Summer Sigler here. And we also have Mr. Jose Espinoza here as well.
And we have Ms. Munoz, who's also supporting our committee from the Superintendent's Office. Okay, we're gonna now move to our land acknowledgement. Excuse me, land, labor, and body acknowledgement. We recognize that we are presently on the lands of the Chochenyo, Muwekma, Karka, and Ohlone peoples, and acknowledge them as the first inhabitants of the land we currently occupy.
Thank you, absolutely. I acknowledge that the burden of environmental exploitation and systemic injustice falls upon the labor of Black and brown bodies in the building of this country and its institutions. I remember that Black and brown people were born and died working this land against their will for generations. I also acknowledge the continued contribution of the labor of survivors over the centuries to today, of all immigrant labor, including voluntary, involuntary, trafficked, forced, and undocumented peoples in the building of what we refer to as the United States.
Thank you so much. Okay, so purpose of our committee is to review and update policy that affects the West Palm Crossing Unified School District. Today, we are reviewing 6 policies. We are starting with 2 board policies coming from the office, the Title IX office for edits. Then we are reviewing our non-discrimination harassment policy. Our 3rd item is a new policy on use of artificial intelligence. Our 4th item is a new board policy on student trustees getting compensated and getting credits for being on the board. Our 5th policy is we're going to review our current policy on graduation ceremonies and activities. And then the last thing we're going to be doing is we're going to be reviewing a new draft of our community schools resolution that was asked from us by United Teachers of Richmond. Then we're going to end with our review of all the policies in the waiting list for the next few months. Okay, so we're now going to move to public comment. Public comment will last 1 hour. The public gets 2 minutes per speaker. We'll also allow public comment at the end of the meeting. Do we have any public comment?
We have no public comment.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, we're gonna then start with the first item, which is review policy 6146.1 and policy 6146.4. And I apologize, those are not coming from Title IX office. Those are coming from our special education office. And I think Mr. Fleischman, who's on the Zoom, will be presenting these. So pass it on to Mr. Fleischman.
Yes, good morning. Good morning, trustees, superintendent, and committee members. Thank you for the time to discuss these 2 policies. The first policy to discuss 6146.1, the high school graduation requirements. This policy is being updated to address needs of students who either are in the Families in Transition program, students in foster care, students with disabilities, and other potential exemptions from the district required graduation requirements, which are different from the state requirements. And so this policy discusses what those exemptions would be and whereby a student would be able to apply for those exemptions. If you're looking at the top of the updated policy, it does give our district requirements of 225 credits. There's language that is being changed from previous language to update what those exemptions would be. To include foster youth, students include experiencing homelessness, former juvenile court students. Yes, sir.
Sorry, would you mind sharing your screen so that we can just look at the policy as we go and the public? Thank you. Sorry.
It says I cannot share screen.
1 second.
No worries.
You should be good now.
Okay. Okay, so I'll scroll back up to the top. You see this first paragraph here is new language discussing, sorry, let me have to move that. Who can be, or the process by which a student can be exempted under California Education Code 51225.3. Our district course requirements are not changed here, so you see it's not highlighted. However, the exemptions, the language around exemptions has been changed from all this that here has been crossed out and will be addressed later on. And here's the new language. So again, it discusses a foster youth, students experiencing homelessness, former juvenile court school students, children of military families, migrant student who transfers into the district or between district schools anytime after completing the second year of high school, newcomer students who's in the third or fourth year of high school, and students shall be exempted from any graduation requirements adopted by the board that are in addition to the statewide course requirements. Those statewide course requirements are at the bottom of the policy, which I'll share as we get down to that portion. Again, here we have language about within 30 days of transfer, the student, we will notify those eligible students that they have a potential for application of these differing standards. We will not require those students who qualify for this exemption to complete any work beyond what is in the state requirements. Nor will they be required to graduate early if they meet those requirements. They are still, essentially, they are still entitled to the 4 years of high school, even if they meet the statewide requirements that would exempt them from the district requirements. Excuse me. Then scrolling down, it talks about students with disabilities, and this is what has been referred to as the alternative pathway to a diploma. There's been a lot of shifting of this statewide over the last 2 years, but ultimately it boils down to two things. If the student is eligible to take the alternative assessment and the student completes the same statewide requirements, then they are eligible for a high school diploma. However, if a student completes the diploma in this track, they do not forfeit their rights to a free and appropriate public education to the age of 22. So a student who takes the alternative pathway laid out here still would be allowed to receive their special education services till 22 years old. These are students who traditionally would have received a certificate of completion, which is laid out below. And so then those are the real significant changes. And then the last piece here is with regard to retroactive diplomas. The last two pieces, former members of the military and evaluating the classes. You know, the designee or the superintendent would have to evaluate classes from any high school, community college, or state college to grant credit towards graduation. Then here at the bottom, these are the state requirements. Which if you compare the two tables, you can see the difference between the state requirements and our district requirements. And that is essentially the review of the policy. So I am complete. I see President Smith-Folds' hand is raised. President Smith-Folds, did you have a question?
No. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Clerk Gonzalez, question?
May I ask one question?
Yeah, please.
Director Fleischman, I just want to make sure that I understand. So children or students that are inside the categories that you listed,
Yes,
when they come to the school and we're looking at their graduation requirements, they have the superintendent or a designee has the option of looking to see if they qualify for graduation based on the circumstance that they come in using our metrics of A to G credits. Is that accurate?
yes. So essentially, I think what you're saying is that the superintendent or designee can review their circumstances and their transcripts to determine if they qualify for the exemption, which would mean they only need the 130 credits, or if they do not qualify for that exemption, then they would need the full 225. Is that the question?
Absolutely. So
Yes.
that makes sense. So what we're doing is we're creating or making sure that we have a category for students, military, homeless, foster people, kids in transition, etc., and saying we have a pathway that will be looked at to ensure that look to see if you're able to reach the graduation requirements of 130 instead of the district requirements of 200 plus.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you so very much. Thank you for that clarification. I appreciate it. I'm complete.
Mr. Fleischman, the second paragraph. Okay, sorry, the long section of new language, the second paragraph, where it starts within 30 days.
Yep.
Is that straight from EdCode?
I believe so.
Okay.
Well, the superintendent designee shall notify. Yes, I think it is incumbent upon us to notify students who qualify for these exemptions.
Got it. Okay.
Another question.
Yeah, please.
Who would hold this work? Would this be counselors? Would this be, what department would hold this work? And how do we ensure that within 30 days of a student arriving to the school that fits in one of these categories, does it go with a case manager? Does it go with the counselor? Is the school principal in charge of making sure? And does the clock start when they're enrolled, or does the clock start day one hitting the campus? Because they could be two different times.
You said day enrolled or day one of showing up to campus?
Right.
Okay. Right. So the first question is about who holds this responsibility. And I think that's going to depend on the avenue by which the student would qualify. If it's a special ed matter, it would be the case manager and the IEP team. If it's any of the other matters, and I may need to defer to the superintendent on this question, it typically goes through educational services. And so the associate superintendent of teaching and learning would assign someone within their department to monitor this and to essentially make the assignment of the responsibility. Ultimately, everything falls upon the principal. So it would really work through the associate superintendent, the executive directors, the principal, and the principal would assign staff at site to handle that.
That's
Okay.
accurate.
Thank you very much. I just have comments.
Okay, well then, does anyone else in the room have any questions? Okay, I don't have any additional questions. What do I move to comment?
Thank you so very much for bringing the policy forward. I think this is a good policy. I think that it creates the level of unreasonable hospitality that we're looking for our students because it's taken into their circumstances. And we know that students are not a monolith. We know that there are circumstances and conditions around when our students are getting to school and how they're getting to school. And I think that we want to make it school an inviting place, not a place of barriers. I think the only thing that I would want to ensure is that whoever holds the work, they have a timeline and training to say, hey, this is important. You can't let this drop. If it goes to your enrollment clerk, whoever it goes through, someone's got to start the clock, put the name on the board, and we have to know by, September 15th, we've got to do something, or by September 13th, whatever it is. That's my biggest pause, because everyone has so much work to do already, but this is something that cannot slip through the cracks. I want to make sure that there is training with our principals at the principal meetings once a month, you bring it up. Hey, make sure you guys check your calendar. Do you have any students that fit into this category? We can't. You got to make sure that this is the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed. So that's what I would be looking for the superintendent. What does the accountability thread look like with this? And then how does the board ensure that we're creating that safety net for these kids and maintaining it? I'm complete.
Yeah, thank you. I agree with everything the president shared. So I'm okay moving this forward as is. You okay with it?
Absolutely.
Okay, then we'll move this one to the full board for the next meeting. If the agenda allows, if not the 17th.
Okay.
And then Mr. Flashman, you have a second one, correct?
Correct.
Go ahead.
So this one is 6146.4, differential graduation and competency standards for students with disabilities. Again, this is the alternative pathway to a high school diploma. If you scroll down here, very similar language to the last policy, the one that the pieces of it that specifically addressed students with disabilities. And ultimately, the two criteria are listed right there. If the student is eligible to take the alternative assessment, and if the student completes the state standards aligned coursework to meet the statewide coursework specified in Ed Code 51225.3. They're eligible for, it is a high school diploma. It is not an alternative diploma. It's an alternative pathway to a high school diploma. It sounds like splitting hairs, but I think it's very important that we have our language correct. It is a high school diploma, just with a different pathway to receive it. And very, very important, these students all still maintain their right to a free and appropriate public education until their 22nd birthday.
Great.
And I'll scroll through here if there are any questions.
No questions.
No questions, just comments.
Okay.
I don't have any questions.
This bottom piece is specifies language that wasn't in the others. It's really an IEP team decision, but ultimately those two criteria dictate their eligibility.
Yeah, let's move to comments. President?
My comment would be to ensure that we are talking to parents about this pathway as early as possible. I think that all students who go through our system of 13 years, they deserve that high school diploma because they've been through the system for 13 years. If there was a diploma that had like a, kind of draped in gold, it should go to the kids with the IEP, but cut in the Bible. Coming to school for them for 13 years looks mighty different than coming to the school for someone that doesn't hold that IEP and that 504. So I've always championed that when we cheer for those kids who are grabbing that diploma, who have the 4.5s and the 4.3s, we need to cheer louder for the kids who have the IEPs and the 504s, because it's a different struggle. I'm glad to see this policy. I'm looking forward to ensuring that all of our students are carrying that high school diploma from WCC USD. I'm complete.
Yeah, my last comments. Thank you, Mr. Flashman, for bringing this to us. Doing it so quickly. And yeah, I'm totally in agreement. So I'm okay moving forward.
Yes.
Wonderful.
Would it be implemented in graduation year 2025? Would that be the implementation?
So the first group of students that is eligible are the students that were in the 9th grade in 22-23 for the alternative pathway to diploma. So 3, 4, 5, 6. It's the graduating class of 2026 are the first under Ed Code that are eligible for this alternative pathway. And
are we reviewing those soon-to-be juniors? Because Haven is 2026, right? So she's getting ready to go into her junior year. Are we reviewing all of or adding it into their annual IEPs to say, now this is an option, here's where you are, here's a review, this is what it looks like? Are you now wanting to take that pathway of a diploma instead of the pathway of a certificate of completion? Or is that part of our IEP training that we're giving the IEP teams?
Yes, all families were notified in the spring of their 9th grade year of 2023. And so that information has already gone out. Obviously, students transfer in and things like that. So it's an ongoing conversation, and it is a part of the IEP, annual IEP process, and will be updated with all teams. And yes, training for all of our case managers. This primarily will be students in our ESN programs, to be very clear. Yeah.
Okay.
And is there going to be a communication that also goes out to principals?
There has been over the past 2 years, but we will continue to, particularly as we get closer to that 2026 graduation time. But this will be updated to them as well. Yes.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
So I also think this is a good thing that the district's doing.
It is.
So it should be a communication blitz about it. The value that we have for all students will be, in my opinion, right? But doing it respectfully. Director Fleischman, I would love for you to make sure if this is something that the communication team and superintendent agree upon, that Director Fleischman is on that to make sure that we are doing it respectfully of our students.
Mm-hmm.
I'm complete.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Mr. Fleischman. Appreciate it.
All right. Thank you so much.
Okay, now we're gonna move to item number 2, review policy 513, non-discrimination / harassment. We reviewed the first draft at the last meeting. So it's coming for second reading. Director Espinosa, you.
Hi, board members and officers. I'm Jose Espinosa, Timeline Director for the Office of Education, including our department is requested to update language within board policy 51. We kept the CDE language within the board policy, and we added the racialized harm language within the policy based on your request. And then that was that new red line.
Okay.
So the new language is the one in red.
Yeah.
I will share my screen so that we can see it. Okay. So the blue was the previous language that we reviewed. And Mr. Espinosa, this came from CDE language.
So now we just sent another draft information. So then that language was based on your request to update it. So it'll be edited to say in accordance with the board's request to add additional information for the racialized harm. The print in blue was requested by CDE to have that language specifically within this board policy.
Got it. Sorry, I'm just
That
curious.
came from Dr.
Oh, this came. Okay, I was asking where it came.
Okay. Yeah. So the racialized harm language came from attorney Catherine Meal.
Oh, it's me.
It actually came from
Dr.
Starr.
And
And I forwarded it to,
Yeah.
she reviewed it.
yes.
No. I have a comment.
So would this language trigger like a student or staff member being able to do a Title IX complaint on, for example, racial slur?
So racial discrimination wouldn't fall under type. It would be more of a uniform complaint procedure. So we would go through that process with the students. So policy 5145.3 would be students.
Just a comment.
Okay, let's move to comments.
I think my comment is, thank you for putting this clarity inside of the policy. The next thing I would ask is for the district to align all of their materials. So align your uniform complaint with this, make sure that it has something that says racialized harm. Align your referral sheets to make sure that it has something that says racialized harm. Align all the supplementary material that go along with when you fill out a complaint. That's something that I think gives empowerment to the policy, is that you have the example materials that go with it. So I think that's the biggest thing. And looking at how we do that at the very bottom level. Kid comes in, kid A says that kid B called them a monkey. What does teacher do? Teacher fills out a form. Does the form have racialized harm on there? Kid B's mom wants to file a complaint. Does the uniform complaint have racialized harm on there? Or this was brought to the attention of so-and-so and nothing was done. Like do we have that to then do the investigation to create the restoration? So that's what I'm looking for, is in the supplementary material now, but this is a very good step. And one that I also think needs to be in our press packet of this is what anti-racism looks like. This is the tangible part of what anti-racism is. I'm complete. And thank you again.
So I'm a little concerned about the vagueness of the language, if I'm right. I think that there's a lot of assumption that can be made, and maybe it should be that way, but for example, what would be the definition of an expression? Or, specifically even just a racial slur. Like what would be considered a racial slur? Like I think that, for example, the other areas of the policy, there's specific ed code that really in detail tells you like what each case means, right? Which is how then an investigation can determine whether or not it was gender discrimination or age discrimination. But when it comes to this, I worry about the vagueness, but I guess that is just ultimately what race discrimination.
I think we have to go through the push and pull of it, because it's just like all beginning policy. We had to go through the push and pull legally of what's sexual harassment, what's discrimination, because what it looked like to some person, it may not be to someone else. But we have to have those examples to then create that curve or that line. So, and I think with racialized harm, it is an individual harm, but it's also a systematic harm. Because if we don't allow children to use slurs when it comes to LGBTQIA. We have defined that, we don't allow. We don't allow children to use slurs when it comes to calling a female out of their name, the B word. We don't allow that. But that took years of push and pull and definition refinement. So I think what we have here is the beginning, but certainly not the end, because we're going to have to define, is using the N word absolutely a racial slur? Well, if you call a child a monkey, is that a racial slur? If you touch my hair, are you violating me? If I told you not to do it 1, 2, 3, 4 times, it's going to take a lot of going back in history and understanding the plight of slavery and the impact that it has today. And I think that that's going to take a lot of education on all of our part, but I think we have to start. And I think that this is the start.
Okay. I was just going to say as well, I think this is work that staff needs to take on. Also, it's something that we brought up at our retreat with Rogers Art. So an example, we've been talking about procedures where if something happens in our district, that we actually spell out, this is what happens next. This is the first step, second step, third step. But I also think, to your point, sir, we need to define as a staff and disseminate this widely, what it means when we say biased speech, conduct, expressions, racialized slurs. Those are 4 definitions that we can come up with and disseminate widely as well.
Yeah. I mean, I think that I definitely understand why people are. My hesitation just comes from a place of when the investigation occurs, like how is it going to be determined
Mm.
whether or not someone's guilty of the actions they're taking or not? Then it becomes again just depending on who is doing the interview and who is determining the investigation, which comes with bias. So there's a part of me that's really worried about being so vague with this language. But I mean, I'm okay with it. I just think that by not going more into detail of what this means in our district, at the same time as putting this policy forward, that we're opening ourselves for not just litigation, but also lack of system to be able to hold someone accountable behavior.
I think that to your point, we need to, those who are doing the investigation, need to have training in what this looks like. They need to have an understanding of what questions you're asking, what documentation are you using, what interviews are you having? Because I think that that's important. But I do agree that getting fine-tuning the definitions is not a bad thing. I don't know if it has to happen here, but I think that it's not a bad thing to let it be known. I think that this will get very messy before it gets clean. And I think we will have to have a standard that we hold and a line that we hold, and we're very clear on that so that it doesn't open up Pandora's box, but it does address what we know is happening in the district. So I think it has to be a both and. I think that this is scary because it hasn't been done before. But I think that if this is the district that can do it, I think with our high level numbers of diversity, because of the unique position that we are with the board, let's start tackling it. And when we get in there and we start wrestling it, then we can, this is a living document. We can always go back and come back. But I think we have to get something passed.
So when I was working with Ms. Miola on the revision of the policy, it was our understanding that you just wanted a paragraph within this specific policy to encompass the information requested. But what she was also working on was a separate policy that discusses specifically the racial equity. So then that can possibly be a separate policy that we can adopt and based on the board's approval. Then I have a draft policy here to take a look at it.
Well, we can discuss it if it's not on the agenda.
But we can take home a look at it.
Yes. I would suggest that if this has to be tied to that, then that we bring this both forward.
At the same time.
So I do think that we're opening a can of worms, we have to and we should. But I am worried we're opening ourselves to litigation.
So you think bringing both back to, is this time sensitive?
The CD language is, but if the board wants to revise it, then I can request an additional extension. I've already requested an extension for August 1st from CDE. So we have some time to work on the language. But if we wanted to wait on approving the policy after your review of that draft, and then approve, that could be an option.
And I think that there should. Let's just do it, and then.
So, see if it passes the board. We look at this and work on this and get it back to the governance as soon as possible. With the understanding that this may come back to.
Yeah. You okay with that?
Yes, sir.
And if we have to separate this at board, the three parts times. The theme partner.
Was legal counsel okay with us moving forward with this and waiting on this part? Because if legal counsel is ultimately okay, then I mean, I'm okay with it, right? Because if they're not worried about the legal repercussions and.
So legal suggested separating the information, so having the racialized harm within that specific board policy, and then us moving forward with the CDE language. So based on the board's approval, you requested the racialized harm information.
So legal was okay, keeping it all blue, don't bring in the pink back yet. And then attaching the pink to this, and then bringing the pink back with this. That's what legal wants.
Yes, and then the pink
Let's just
language
do
is
it.
already
Okay.
within that document.
Let's do it that way with the understanding that we are bringing this pink back as soon as we can with this, because I don't want it to slip through the cracks. But let's just bring, my suggestion is we bring blue to the board. So it relieves your time thing with an explanation that we're adding, we want to add racialized harm definition along with a policy to put in there. Is that what we're saying? I can agree with that.
So that policy will come back to the governance committee.
This, yeah.
With- and-
Along with this, with the
Yes.
red.
Yes.
Gotcha.
And we're saying August.
Okay.
It's
Next meeting's in August.
so, Mr. Spencer, if you could let Ms. Miller know that we define this review alongside this being part for that.
Okay.
If we're coming back in August, could we also have examples of the updated evidential material that would come, like, is there enough time to have an example of what the uniform complaint form could look like if it included racialized?
So I got you.
Is
Like a
there
referral form.
for August, for the
Yes.
uniform complaint form, the forms that we have teachers fill out if they're sending a student out of class?
Mm-hmm.
Any of
That is enough
supplementary
time.
material, could we
Yeah.
have enough time to bring all of that together so we can kind of look at it as a packet,
Mm-hmm.
a racialized harm packet that hopefully gets impacted or gets put in place in September?
Yeah.
If we're looking at it in August. I'm complete.
It's a good idea.
Well, I'm being a genius, friend. It's 15 minutes.
Okay, perfect. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Spencer. So let's move forward to the next item, which is the new policy on the use of artificial. So Ms. Logan, this is item coming from you, so, yeah.
Thank you for having me. This is a new draft board policy that our use of artificial intelligence in everything that they do. So we all know artificial intelligence is here to stay, it's growing, it's expanding. It is changing the way people work, students learn, the way teachers, to a degree, the way teachers teach, but really in terms of like tools for efficiency and productivity. There's some real positives that AI provides, and there are some cautionary tales that we need to really talk about. So the purpose of this policy is to help us set a container as a system for acknowledging that AI is here and folks are using it. Secondarily, how do we want folks to be using it? What does responsible use look like? And then what do we do when responsible use is not occurring? And when I talk about a responsible use, that's both on the individual, but it's also on the technology itself. So AI is currently embedded into a lot of software, and much of it is quiet and silent, and we don't even know. An example, a help desk ticketing system now has AI embedded into it, right? It helps tremendously with productivity. It's not really a concern from my perspective because there's no student privacy concerns. But what if it's not a help desk? What if it's a learning management? What if it's on a Zoom and there's a bot that's capturing all of that data and information, and we are talking about students? That is problematic. And so the purpose of this is really, like I said, to make sure, first and foremost, the software that we are reviewing and evaluating all the software that's to be sure that we are not inadvertently sharing some data that we should not be sharing. We are also want to be sure that we're looking at open versus closed AI. So with open AI, it's just that it's open. The source code is open, it's quite accessible. And so that also brings risk. So we need to be very, very, very careful when we use OpenAI. We need to make sure we're being compliant with our FERPA, Family Education Right Privacy Act rule, as it relates to any digital work. And then as it relates to students, we also need to be really thoughtful around how, if and how students are using AI. So our approach has been, let's be thoughtful and careful and make sure we're really readying the adult in our system to, again, understand what is AI, how it can be used, and provide that training and support. We currently, as an example, we allow on our staff network ChatGPT for staff. We do not allow ChatGPT for students. We need to ready ourselves as a system to make sure that students have the support they need to responsibly use AI. And we have a lot of difficult conversations I think to have, right? Because it's a complex topic around when is it okay, when is it not, citing sources, etc. So this is really the first step. I would say that passing this policy, having this policy would allow us to have some language in our staff and student accessible use policies around the use of AI. And then the next step would really be drilling down and creating really concrete guidelines for what that looks like, and then the professional learning over the course of next year for staff and then staff.
Thank you. That was really helpful. A few questions. Do you have questions?
I think that you addressed most of my concerns. My questions are around, as an English teacher, what are the safeguards like when I'm grading papers, looking at essays, when I'm looking at student work, right? That's going to be graded, that then turns around and turns into a GPA, right? Because you get A, you get this, you get that. So I like my question would be, how much training and how quickly are we going to be able to ready our teachers to handle the AI is coming, because the kids are far more advanced than our teachers are already.
So I would say in terms of ready our teachers, we started having often taking questions last year from teachers. There are a variety of tools available. Actually, some are embedded inside of our Google apps, where you can actually check for AI. Some screening tools. There are also some productivity tools for teachers. So the idea would be we would use August time to really provide the first school some intensive learning sessions for teachers, various modalities, some synchronous learning, and then we also have posted asynchronous learning where folks can go back and learn, certainly through the TTLs as a way of, supporting their fellow teachers in school. So we have a plan to roll that out. But like you said, students are ahead of teachers, all of us, ahead of all of us. And so it's going to be constant, and we're going to have to keep checking in and kind of iterating.
My last question is, because you know that there are teachers out there like me who resist any type of change or even learning about change. It took so long for me to love the Promethean board, right? Like longer than it should have, because I should have fallen in love with it right away. What do you have in place for, and I guess you said with your TTLs, but on the ground training about, you don't have to be afraid of this, but you do have to be knowledgeable about this because it's here. Do you have, and I think you just spoke to it, but I just want to make sure you have plans for on the ground education for those resistant teachers?
Most definitely, most definitely. Some of it is kind of what you're saying, is the reality check of it is here, right, whether you like it or not. And students are using it, whether we like it or not. So there's that, which is kind of the stick part of it, but there's also the carrot piece, which is it has tremendous capacity to really support each of us in the different kind of work that we do to do that work. And so showing folks what that looks like. And I think like with everything, like Promethean too, giving people time to tinker with it, because you don't know something, it's scary, but if you can actually take the time to try it out, it shows you, And it's kind of low risk in that sense, and that's how we've developed the professional sessions. There's times for folks to try to move on, go back, whether you're classroom, do it in your own time, and then come back, and really allowing that time to help with folks to adjust to change.
Okay, I only have comments. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So I'm kind of a nerd about AI use in the classroom for the last few weeks.
Yeah.
And when I saw this policy coming, I like every morning I've been like watching YouTube and TED Talks about. It's crazy how like in a few weeks things have moved, right? And with the introduction of Chat 4.0 and the use for classrooms and teachers, especially college classes, it's like a little frightening how fast we're advancing.
Yeah.
So my first question is more of like the full policy. How would we communicate the different pieces of the policy to our whole system before school starts? Because there are some concrete things that we are prohibiting, right? And there's some concrete things that we're allowing. So with 1,700 teachers, you know, how do we make principles? Like what is the path for the communication?
So I think there would have to be really 4 communication paths. The central office and central leadership communication path. I think there is that for site leaders. I think there's for teachers and those who have provide direct services to students. And then there's that to students and therefore their parents. And I would say that those would have happened in those concentric circles and in that order. So starting with central office, build awareness. We have this policy, this is what it means. And so this policy would essentially be accompanied by a cover sheet for each audience. What is this? What does this mean for you? And what support are you going to get to implement it? And then I think the concrete support for teachers and for site leaders would happen in August. With the start of school as a first step. And then probably, honestly, let's get started because we all know August and early September is wild, right? Getting settled, and then kind of a deeper dive then through the TTL.
That makes a lot of sense. My second question is around the usage of software. So it doesn't seem like it's different than our current procedure, right? If a site wants to purchase a software or a teacher, they have to get current permission, right?
Correct.
So it wouldn't change that procedure.
It doesn't. It just tightens it up and it brings more awareness.
Okay, the second piece is if teachers or sites want to use OpenAI, would they have to get parental permission every time or just like once for the whole year if they're planning to use it?
Yeah.
Just once, okay. And then the number 5 on the policy about cited work. Is that different than current policy of when a student writes an essay or, you know, obviously cites something, like is it already policy that they have to do that?
So there is, and I don't know it off the top of my head, the existing policy around. Yeah.
Where
So
kids have to use MLA format or whatever the format is in the classroom.
Did it in a few years. But it's really about plagiarism.
Okay.
Yeah. And
Citing your sources, and this is what plagiarism is.
Gotcha, okay.
This is really just being explicit, but around.
All right. Okay. Okay, there's a comment.
I think my comments are, when we're talking around plagiarism, making sure that students understand using ChatGPT or AI is a form of not using your own voice, your own writing, your own whatever. I think that your plan to go central office, principals, site leaders, students, parents, I would add in community, because when they're giving out scholarships, we want those scholarships because they're based on essays. So we want those essays to have a part where the community understands that our policy is that it has to be student generated work, not artificial work, not someone else's work, but it has to be their own voice and their own work. I'm sure that that's going to come up when students are submitting essays to colleges, but we're talking about here, we want the community to kind of be in line with our policy that they can't submit their own words in class and then submit in ChatGPT essay to you and get a $50,000 scholarship. We want those things to be aligned. We want our students to be aligned. Same thing when they're doing any type of submission of essays in school for graduation, for essays, where we want this to be their works. There's ways that we can help get them to writing their best self, but we don't want them to have someone to do it for them. I think that that's my only comment, is including that part with the community. Also, I would like to see what it looks like with our special ed students. Is there a modification or a, not modification, it'd be a modified or adaptation, but adaptation. I know, accommodation. How does AI, is there a place for AI in special education through our modification or our accommodation? And if it's not, how do we make sure that that's clear? If it is, how do we make sure that that's clear? Because I know that some of my own students use text to chat or text to type or whatever it is, where they can just say it and then it types up on the computer. What does that look like with our technology team that deals specifically with special? I'm complete, and thank you for this. It's scary, but I mean, the first time I found out how to use a filter, I fell in love with it. So I'm assuming I'm gonna fall in love with this too. So I'm complete.
Thank you, President. Yeah, thank you for bringing this forward. I do think that AI can allow for really great things if done correctly. So I know we're like obviously concentrating on the negatives because we have to serve our system, but I think that I'm looking forward to seeing what type of PD is offered. Love to go and observe and learn, because I think that, I mean, just Oakland Unified uses AI report cards to help teachers, right? So it could be actually an amazing tool to support system and our overwhelmed adults.
Yeah.
So I would investigate that. It's a free tool, for example, and I know it's being adopted in different districts now. So it could be a really good thing. I saw there's like a new tool for lesson planning, and like being able to like upload your curriculum, and like obviously getting ask our educators to just have AI create all their lessons. But there's like when you have NeedASub or whatever, like it might be like a way to support our educators in ways that we don't know. So I love the plan for communication. And I know you also sent us a timeline of, the year, and I think that's great. So I know this is just the first step, so we need to revise this. Welcome to bring us revisions. So, but I'm okay moving forward.
Okay, moving forward.
Absolutely. Wonderful.
I did want to say one thing. I do want to make sure that if this trickles down to the classroom, especially as an English teacher, it needs to be, teachers need to be reminded, put it on your syllabus. Because that syllabus is incredibly signed, even though they're underage and they can't really sign a contract. But if you have the parents read and then the kids sign and bring back, if it's not there, and I use AI and you dock me for it, I have a right, now I'm gonna be mad because it wasn't in your syllabus. You said I can't plagiarize, but does plagiarize include AI? So we need to just be very clear because kids are very tough. So if it's gonna get into the classroom, put it on the syllabus.
Yep.
Make it part of their rules and regulations inside the classroom, whatever it is. So just to ensure that we have our eyes dotted. I'm complete.
Thank you. Okay, wonderful. Then we'll move forward. Okay, thank you, Ms. Logan. Okay, now we're gonna move to item number 4, our new policy for student trustee compensation and credits. We've looked at this a couple times. We're now reviewing the final draft to hopefully set the report sometime this summer. So I'm gonna share my screen because we have 2 areas where we have to make a decision. So the first section, which I think might be the easy lift, so I'm gonna start there even though it's below, is the part I'm highlighting. which is when the compensation will start. We had a few conversations last meeting that it would start in September, in March, in January. So I had written January, so I wanted us to make a decision on whether or not that's when we want that to start, because it would be going back to paying current trustees and give them credit. And then the second piece that we have to decide, which I hope that we get some feedback from Ms. Siegler and Dr. Hurst, is the paragraph that I'm highlighting about the percentage, and we kept going back and forth about you know, how they will be elected and whether or not we're going to be a preference in certain schools or not. And we kept going back and forth. So we'll go to that second, but why don't we start with the compensation piece, because I think these are the only two sections that we needed to revisit. Did either of you have any thoughts on that piece? Or do you want to share?
I think January is generous, but I think you're a generous person. I am not so much a generous person. I think that the current student board trustees started when?
January.
We started talking about this when?
May?
Look, you just said, you just answered my own question. I would be willing to put a second date on the table. My date is April, May, June, 3 months. Instead of January, February, March, April, May. 6-month compensation package, man. I think 3 months would be, that's my suggestion, 3 months.
Okay.
Yeah, I am totally fine with it being since January. I remember listening to the president at that last conversation, and I understand, you know, when we first started having the conversation, but AB 275 was approved back in January, and I do know that San Diego, right. So San Diego did the same thing. And I think the students probably know that as well. And not that they have a say-so in this decision, and they don't. But I would say I'm fine with January.
So that's 6 months at $500. So that's $7,000 because it's 2 of them. That's 3,500. So 6 times 5 is 35, 3,500. Am I right?
That's right.
Let's check the math. So that's $7,000, and it comes from what funding source?
It would come from the general fund. I talked to Dr. Moses about that.
So here's my argument of why I think she, and I can be convinced. But so I think that student trustees have been doing the same work all semester, right? I don't think that they started doing more work in April because they're like, oh, we might get paid, right? I think they've been doing the same work. So I think that even though we started talking about this in April, our intention is to pay for their work. So, and even though we have added, excuse me, additional responsibilities that current trustees might have not done because they didn't know it's part of the requirement because it's new. I think it's harder to say you only get paid for 3 months because it's not the same.
It does. It makes sense. I think that I'm just being prodigy.
You're being physically responsible.
Well, let's say that. So let's say that I agree with January.
You okay with that, sir?
Yes.
Is it? Oh, I have another question. But they're little kids. They don't get taxed, right? They're gonna get the whole 500, or do they get taxed?
I'll talk to Dr. Moses and check with her
and see if they get taxed.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it doesn't change my mind. I was just curious to know that if they're if their mind they think they're getting 3,500, we need to make sure that they understand that welcome to a big girl world. You make tax,
right,
and they only be bringing home half that. Okay, I'm complete. I'll say yes. I'll say I'm okay with it being January 2024.
Okay, wonderful. And I think that for specifically, and really we should be talking long term, but I think specifically for our current 2 board members, I think one of them, the credit's not gonna matter. But then for the other one, we should make sure that she gets that that credit for certain.
Gotcha. Okay.
And then moving forward, we have already talked to Ed Services about how they will provide the credit.
Yes.
Okay, well then, let's move.
Can I ask can I make a comment about this one? There's a part of me that also would like to add a level, even though I'm Scrooge McDuck with the money. There's a part of me that would like to add an option of having a district letter written that you could use for college or you could use for a job. A recommendation letter after you become a student trustee, after you do your fulfill, you know, like in a job. Like if you do all your time and you have all of whatever, having some type of district, it didn't have to be extremely personal, but like a simple letter to say, this is what was required. They did all the requirements to meet this level of being a student trustee, something that they can then put into something that carries longevity, right? And even Kyle Carr, who's going off to Berkeley and wants to be part of their leadership team, having a letter that you've already been part of a leadership team. And here's the documentation, what it looks like. Just a thought. You don't have to answer now.
Well, I've been doing letters for all of our student trustees since I've been here. It's not included that piece, but I can start including that piece.
Because it's a paid position that comes with different accountability and responsibilities, because that's what we're adding to ensure that they're able to meet the payment requirement, because now they have to go through all the standards and ethics that we have. That's an extra layer to it, and we have different expectations. So maybe crafting a different, stronger letter about what all they did would be beneficial to them.
I think that's a good idea. The other thing that I would add is that there are some new requirements here. So going to student congress at the beginning of the year and explaining the changes, if the full board agrees with the policy, I think would be really
cool.
Okay, let's go to that other paragraph. So just for review, what we have written was at least one student elected to the board must attend high school with 60% or higher free reduced lunch program eligibility. If there's no candidate from a school who meets that criteria, the percentage may be lowered to 40%. But there must be evidence that the OCSD attempted to recruit someone who met the criteria stated above. Student board members may serve a maximum of 2 terms, and an incumbent student board member may opt to run a second term if he, she, they so desire. We had a lot of discussion about the 60-40% threshold. Current threshold, if I remember correctly, had Kennedy, Richmond High, De Anza, Middle College, Vista, and Greenwood at 60%. And then had Pinole High School, Hercules High School, and Acevedo High School as the 40%. Or lower. So how do we feel about that? And Ms. Sigler, I wanted to, we asked you to also be here because you've had experience also recruiting students. And with those thresholds, we just wanted.
I really like the intent of saying we're not going to get it. You know, we know there's a pattern of which schools student board members come from. So I really like the intent. And I believe that the compensation is actually going to maybe entice some students that haven't previously been enticed. I worry because our high schools are large. So if we look at a high school 5%, a 1,400 kid high school at 50% has 700 students who are low income, right? And that's 700 students who are excluded because their school was excluded, not because of the designation that they fit under. And so I wonder if language around creating a cadence of when schools are allowed to elect. So saying, you know, this term is for Hercules and Kennedy, this term is for Middle College and Richmond High. Might accomplish some of that equity of representation without excluding student groups because they attend.
What if we were to write it as at least one student elected to the board must attend a high school with 60% or higher free reduced lunch program eligibility, or that student must be a free and reduced lunch student. Because then, even if you attend Otsego High School, you still put in.
Like, because you're still allowing the kids, but you're pushing on, we need to go to the walls.
In school.
Or who the training.
Or be designated, or be designated. Does that make sense?
I mean, if you wanted to, sorry, I see your intent. You could just say only students who are free and reduced lunch eligible.
Yeah.
Can apply.
Oh, and then just delete.
And just delete them, yeah.
Well, that kind of.
Or have first choice.
Or have first choice,
Wait,
yeah.
Can you repeat what you said?
Yeah, what I was saying, you could eliminate the whole 60% or higher. If you're really trying to focus on students who are free and reduced lunch eligible, and just make it about those students.
So just saying one student on the student board of education needs to have the eligibility or the title or whatever.
Right.
Fall under free and reduced lunch.
Right.
So at least one student elected to the board must be free reduced lunch program eligible.
Mm-hmm.
Eligible?
Yeah.
Eligible.
And
Which also then justifies the compensation.
mm-hmm.
If there was no candidate from the school, then must be maybe.
Or should we just delete that?
I would say you don't need that. If you're getting rid of the 60%.
Someone has to be.
Right.
So then you, whatever the district has to do,
Right.
you have to go find a student that has that eligibility.
Mm-hmm.
What if they can't?
So I think if there's two and we're saying one of them has to,
Mm-hmm.
considering it's the majority of the district, we should
be able to find it.
Right. Right.
But if we can't, I think that's a bigger issue that we talk about.
Mm-hmm.
Why?
Right. Why can't we find? Mm-hmm.
Okay, I like that. I
Mm-hmm.
think it's much simpler.
Mm-hmm.
Do we need the last sentence? An incumbent student board member may opt to run for a second term if he or she desires, because you already say they can run for.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
They serve up to.
Student board members may serve a maximum of 2.
Do we want to do that to them? Because what if both students are like, yeah, we'll stay for the rest of the year?
Do they have to go through the election process again as an incumbent?
Maybe they should.
Yeah.
I think they should too.
If they want to stay back to back, I think they should be eligible to run. They would just have to run. They would have to be part of the election process.
Have to be reelected.
Yeah.
By student Congress.
Because we're only saying they can do 2 terms, so it's not like they can do 3 years.
Okay, that sounds great. Does that sentence make sense, everybody?
Yes.
got it in the elections. Congress.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that does, may I make a comment?
Yeah.
I think that with this new policy, we have to make sure that our all student Congress is free of any bias. And that's full representation, that they understand what elections are, that they understand that election process needs to take place. If they're doing speeches or forums or whatever they're doing inside all student Congress, I think that has to be shored up to ensure that there are no biases. Now you're taxing money to us. It's a different ballgame when you're paying people for some support service. I think that we also need to look if there are any employment rights, because what if my 9th grader is elected? Well, she's 14. She can run because she's in high school, but can she get paid? Does it go to her or does it go to me as the mother? Because she doesn't even have a work permit yet, because those are 15. So what does that look like? So I think that there's just some questions that this adds, layers that it adds. It doesn't mean it's not a good policy, but I think it's going to have to be a living, breathing document, because it can lead to questions. And are we able to answer those questions? I don't know if San Diego has something that they've already done, but for me, that was the first thing that came to my mind. Okay, what if my kid's 14?
And there's a really question. So this is the first year that we've ever had sophomore students.
Yeah.
It's always been seniors, as far as I know. But now that maybe others, but it's a really good point. It really can they be paid at that age?
I don't know. I don't know what that looks like, so I guess it's a question for
check.
business office or it's a
I can
question
check.
for HR, maybe. I don't know if a 14-year-old can be paid.
Do you want me to find out about?
That'd be great, thank you.
Great, yeah.
With a certain number of hours that are
Because
actually work.
then we just need to change the sentence of the compensation to just say if age, like
Paid to
if age
designate.
allowed or whatever. Well, not even that. If you're not of the age to get paid, then you just get credit. No.
We'll see how fast.
I mean,
Because here's my question though, if I'm doing the work, why are you now age discriminating against me that I'm doing the same work that they're doing, that you're saying they get paid and credit, but I only get credit and I'm 14, then now I'm gonna feel some type of way, because now I feel like you're discriminating against me because of my age. Unless we change the policy that only sophomores and above can apply, because then you need a work permit. But that's a whole different conversation to have. Because then but we have age requirements on lots of things, like every freshman has to take PE, right? We say that have to take PE, only sophomores can take advanced placement classes. So we have age restrictions.
Yeah.
It's just going to be one of them that we restrict in age based on compensation can only go to those who work.
yeah, that's a really good question. Why don't we like pause on this one for a second until we get an answer?
Yeah. I went for Kim.
Okay.
Dr. Moses.
Sigler also, whoever answers first. But then why don't we move to policy 5127 and we'll come back with a decision there. So this one, oh, thank you. This is policy 5127, graduation ceremonies and activities. I think this one was requested by you.
I don't know. Isn't that weird?
Right.
I can't remember.
I did ask Rosa, she said it was requested. She said you.
I
So,
requested it?
yes.
She didn't say me.
Yeah, to be honest, I have no idea why I requested it. I've been going to the assumption for 2 meetings that it's you.
Is it something that we discussed at a graduation? Because I think it's something that we discussed at a graduation, and I can't remember what it was. Old age.
Yeah. Yeah, okay, well, listen, we'll table it. We'll just put it on the wait list.
Okay.
Then if
yeah, I checked in with her this morning. We was going down the list. She said, yeah, Arkansas Joy asked for it.
no,
I don't know what it was.
if I get inspiration, I'll bring it back.
I'll watch the graduation.
We had some graduation committee. But
that's what it was. We were talking about locations. We'll have to table.
I don't think so. Let's table it. Apologize, and then we'll revisit it. Okay, and then ironically, UTR messaged me during the meeting that they will not be able to participate in this meeting, so I think we should table.
So that's one. Okay.
Let's table it too.
Which one, the waiting list one?
Yeah, no. It's the one that you added about the community schools.
Okay.
You just
I did. Why is it there?
So we'll just,
it's just not on.
table.
Oh,
Yeah, let's table.
The community school.
Okay, so let's go back to the decision on the student one. Either.
I'm not. Let me call her. Let me step away just for a second.
Okay, no problem.
I do want her to answer, but I do think you can give. It's just there's limitation.
Okay.
But if they tell me I'm wrong, I'm wrong.
Yeah.
I also would wonder if you want a freshman at student board, it's okay to say want you to have
Student conference.
Well, because in our board policy for leadership, you have to be on the board a year before you run for board leadership. That's one of our policies. And we do that, so to your point, there's experience about being on the board, right? And unless everybody on the board is brand new, then you have to pick leadership from the brand new line, right? I think unless everybody on the All Student Congress that's running is a freshman, you know what I mean, which I don't think would happen traditionally.
We could have had a sentence that in order to serve on the board, you must be at least
A sophomore. I think that covers it. I think that would cover it. I think to the Sigler's point, it gives you a year of experience in high school. It gives you some of that kind of weighted life experience under your belt. It's also one of those things that we have to take into account transportation. We have to take into account all, hey, baby, the sophomore had a brother. He used to go to 11 o'clock, 30, and sometimes not having that as part of it. I don't know. I think, yeah, I agree with you, having something in there.
my expert said, yes, I believe you can get a work.
I would say go with
Yeah.
sophomore, because sophomores are 15, when I know you can have a work permit in California at 15. I do think that there's hours attached to a work permit, so we would still need to look at the hours to make sure that what we're requiring of them doesn't go over the hours that they can work.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Dr. Moses said that she's looking at labor law. She's reading it now, and if you're 14, you can work, what did it say, 3 hours a week?
Well, they would.
3 hours per day. 3 hours per day.
But then our board meetings.
Okay, so
So why don't we write things on this? In order to serve on the board, you must be at least a sophomore in high school and 15 years of age.
Yeah.
Because, I mean.
I like and 15 years of age, because we do have those students who skip a grade and they can be a sophomore at 14, they can be a sophomore at 13. So yeah, I think and 15 years of age.
Because I think that we would say, be saying, then they wouldn't give us.
Well, if that. Then
And it never, again, when we're looking at All Student Congress, there's nothing that is preventing a freshman to shadow one of the board. They want to be in the leadership position next year. I also think it would, again, look at All Student Congress, are you building the bench? Are you giving some of these freshmen some, are they able to make? Are they able to what are you putting them on your
We okay? Okay, sorry everyone was listening. We're now back on. Okay, so the sentence that we are reading says, in order to serve on the board, you must be at least a sophomore in high school and 15 years of age. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Well then, I'm okay moving this forward.
Okay. Yes.
Okay, wonderful. Then, Ms. Munoz, we're gonna get one of our future agendas as well. Okay, great. Well then, now we're moving to our last item, which is a review of all the policies that we have waiting list. So at our next meeting, I wanted to suggest that we do number 4, new policy on book review and book banning. Number 16, the community schools resolution. Number 2, if we remember why we want to put it for graduation ceremonies. And then I would suggest number 17, approve the flag. I want to get that before school.
If we have time, can we do number 3?
Yeah, definitely.
Gonzalez, do you mind saying them again?
Yeah, it was number 2,
Okay.
number 3, number 4, 16 and 17.
And these are for the next board meeting. I mean, for the next
Governance, yeah. Oh, and then the updated non-discrimination for the language needed. Okay, well, that was our last item. So do we have any public comment for another meeting?
We have no public comment.
Okay, great. Well, thank you everyone for watching. Our next meeting will be in August. We'll let everyone know the date and location.
Thank you.
Any last minute? Any last comments?
No, enjoy your summer. You have 2 months as of yesterday. We'll see you on August the 19th. It's coming fast. I'm complete.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So good with the Zoom.